Hey, this is Donald Jenkins, your Master Purpose Development Coach, CEO of the Purpose Development Institute in Atlanta, Georgia. And welcome to the Gold Standard for Spiritual Growth invitation. I want to take this time out to invite you and your leaders to a special webinar presentation, a short presentation. I realize that your time is short. And one of the things that I practice here at the Purpose Development Institute is to never duplicate something that you are already doing. So I want to invite you to a special presentation to show you some research-based findings in regards to the gold standard for spiritual growth. So in this short video, I want to communicate to you what I am going to be covering during our time within that presentation. Is that number one, I need you to understand is that 92% of the people that you minister to in your church do not have a heart to be a disciple. They don't have a heart for self-transformation, because in order to be a disciple, you have to undergo self-transformation. So as a result of that, it creates a spiritual growth gap. And as a result of that, we put them in a position to where now they're building a relationship with God from a place of weakness. So even though you're preaching great messages, you're doing a great job being on the front lines of saving souls, we're still sending them out the door that in a place where they are building that relationship from a place of weakness. Now, notice, I didn't call you weak. I didn't call you preaching weak. Didn't call your church weak. It's just the place that they're operating from is a place of weakness. It's a place that don't understand how to execute the gold standard for spiritual growth. So in this season that we're in, specifically in the time that we look at, that we're living in regards to, at any day, Jesus Christ could come. We know that no man or woman knows the day or the hour, but it's sure looking like we're getting close. And we want to make sure that we can win as many people to the gospel as we can. We want to make sure that we can multiply our effort. But when that spiritual growth gap is there, we minimize our efforts. So you have a few people that's bringing more people into the kingdom of God. We want to multiply our effort. We want to make sure that we can strengthen all believers to build a relationship with God from a place of strength, so that now we can multiply our effort of bringing more people into the kingdom of God. So here are some things that I am going to be discussing in this short webinar. Is that number one, you as a leader, you are light years ahead of where your leaders are in your church in regards to spiritual growth, and where your congregation is. And that's where the gap exists. Is that how do you close that gap between where you are and where the congregants are and where your leaders are? Because again, when that gap exists, then they build that relationship from a place of weakness. We minimize the effort of taking the gospel to the world. So what we've done from a research perspective, we have identified that gold standard for closing that gap. And in the short presentation, I am going to be unpacking our research findings so that now you can recognize what the gold standard is. Because we've been preaching for years, doing a great job on the front lines, but I can look at my own situation, how for years I preached without understanding the gold standard. Was I effective? Yes. Got people saved, but it's more than just getting them saved. It's helping them to become disciples. So how do I overcome that 92% of people that do not have a heart to be a disciple? That's where the research came in at. That's where Dr. Lily and I rolled up our sleeves and went to work so that you don't have to labor hard in that area. So here are some objectives that I'm going to be covering in that short presentation. I'm going to bring them up on the screen so that you can see what they are. Is that number one, I'm going to highlight the potential risk that are linked to growing members. You want your members to grow from the messages that you're preaching, but there are 3 risks associated with their growth potential that I'm sure that you are just like I was years ago. I didn't even know that these risks existed. So you want to make sure that you're able to identify what those risks are, because this is the devil's playground in those 3 areas. And you want to make sure that your messages and the work that God's called you to do is minimizing those risks. So I'm going to highlight those risks for you. Then secondly, I'm going to create awareness for the gold standard for spiritual growth. See, I didn't even know what that standard was for years. And I'm sure that you're in the same position that I was in. So I want to create that awareness of what it is, come straight out of the Bible so that you can recognize, that standard and that place where the enemy is targeted. Because here's what happens. As soon as church is over, the enemy is going to go, they're going to leave the four walls of the church, and the enemy is going to test to see if they can meet that gold standard for spiritual growth. And in many cases, that 92% of people that we minister to, they're not going to be able to meet that standard. So it's going to slow down our effort to impact the world with the gospel of God's kingdom. And then lastly, I am going to unpack the importance of weaponizing growth potential. See, it's important for you to understand that there is a skill set that we need to focus on to help the believers weaponize their growth potential. Because when we focus on that area, then we position them to make that transition from building a relationship with God from a place of weakness to building that relationship from a place of strength. Because one of the most important weapons is their ability to grow. And that's a skill set that has to be unpacked. So in this webinar, I am going to unpack this for you and your leaders. Now, this is a special invitation just for you and your church. I am doing one-on-one invitations for you and your church. No other church is going to be involved in this process, just you and your leaders. So make sure that you look at your calendar, schedule some time so that we can remove these risks, from the midst, and the people that God has called you to minister to. Now you're able to help them build that relationship from a place of strength. So God bless you. Appreciate the work that you do. And I look forward to hearing from you. Make sure you reach out to us on our contact page at purposefitskills.com. Reply back to emails or reply back, through text.